This is a common sight. People drive through the Nebraska countryside, pass through another small town, and then they see a school which looks like it could double as a museum. As they move ahead, they realize that half the storefronts are empty. The welcome sign still lists a population from 2010. They check Google Maps and it says the next gas station is 40 miles away. Welcome to the Great Plains Exodus, and it's bleeding Nebraska dry faster than a farmer's wallet at John Deere. This isn't just about a few struggling counties anymore. Nebraska's rural heartland is experiencing a population hemorrhage that would make a trauma surgeon nervous. And while state officials cheerfully point to overall population growth, they conveniently ignore the fact that their state is turning into a demographic donut. All dense metropolitan filling with a massive crumbling ring of emptiness around it. The numbers are in and they're not pretty. They are alarming. Are you wondering why Nebraska's best and brightest are treating the Cornhusker state like it's a launching pad rather than a landing strip? Stay right here to know what's approaching Nebraska. Comment if you think cornfields deserve emotional support, and subscribe so you never live in a place where the Wi-Fi loads slower than winter ends. The Great Nebraska Shell Game, population growth that isn't really growth. First, let me hit you with the plot twist that would make M. Night Shyamalan jealous. As of today, Nebraska's population sits at approximately 2,023,070 people. Sounds impressive, right? Pop the champagne. Except here's the kicker. That growth is almost entirely concentrated in just 3 counties: Douglas, Sarpy, and Lancaster. Sarpy County alone is showing an 8.2% growth rate, while urban areas are expanding at 1.8% compared to the state's overall 1.2% annual growth. That's like saying your business is thriving because the CEO's salary increased while everyone else got laid off. The reality is more brutal than a February wind across the sandhills. Between 2020 and 2024, 56 counties, that's 60% of Nebraska's 93 counties, experienced population losses, with the average loss being 2.4%. Grant and Boyd counties both suffered losses greater than 6%. We're talking about more than half the state actively shrinking. It's not a population distribution, it's a population consolidation, and rural Nebraska is getting the short end of that very pointy stick. Think of Nebraska like a leaky bucket. Sure, you're pouring water in at the top. Hello, Omaha and Lincoln. But there are dozens of holes at the bottom. Goodbye, literally everywhere else. The bucket technically has more water, but most of it is pooling in one corner while the rest slowly drains away. More than half of Nebraska's 93 counties have seen decreasing numbers over the past few decades, and it's only getting worse in 2026. Do you want to know what's really happening? The state is essentially cannibalizing itself, with rural residents fleeing to urban centers or leaving Nebraska entirely, while officials smile for the cameras and talk about growth. The young person's dilemma. Stay and stagnate, or leave and thrive. Let's get real about what's driving young people away from rural Nebraska. It's not wanderlust, it's not TikTok, it's economic survival, with a side of actually wanting a life. Nebraska's 50 most rural counties saw a 22% decline over the last decade in residents under the age of 18. That's not a trend, that's a youth exodus. These kids are watching their parents work their fingers to the bone on farms that require fewer workers each year thanks to automation. They're looking around at towns where the main big business is Walmart, drawing people from outside the county because there's literally nothing else. The irony is delicious and depressing in equal measure. Agriculture, Nebraska's crown jewel industry, has become so mechanized that farmers are using more and more machinery. So many young people aren't coming back to help on the farm like they used to. The very thing that was supposed to keep families together is pushing them apart. But it's not just about farming. Young people in rural Nebraska face what researchers call brain drain. And no, that's not what happens after your third beer at the county fair. It's the systematic loss of educated, talented individuals who realize their degrees in computer science, graphic design, or healthcare administration are about as useful in rural Nebraska as a screen door on a submarine. Survey after survey shows the same pattern. Rural Nebraska kids love their communities. They appreciate the tight-knit atmosphere, the Friday night football games, the sense of belonging, but when you ask them if they'll stay as adults, the answer is a resounding not a chance. Why? Because unless their dream career involves combining soybeans or working the Walmart checkout, the opportunities simply don't exist. So what does this mean for the towns they're leaving behind? Keep watching. It gets worse. The vicious cycle. No jobs, no people, no future. Here's where Nebraska's rural areas have found themselves trapped in a feedback loop more vicious than a prairie tornado. It works like this. Young people leave because there are no jobs. Businesses don't come because there are no young workers. Without new businesses, there are no new jobs. Without jobs, more young people leave. Rinse, repeat, watch your town die slowly. Jefferson County officials point to the lack of employment opportunities and workforce housing as primary reasons why people leave. But here's the cruel twist, even when they try to build housing, they can't because living spaces are being removed due to floodplain regulations, and they can't build in ideal places since grants are often tied to green spaces. It's like trying to win a game where the rules are designed to make you lose. Let's talk about Dawes County, where the county clerk bluntly stated that city fathers don't wholeheartedly encourage new businesses because they want to maintain their agricultural focus. We're committed to the status quo even if it means committing economic suicide. In 35 years, this clerk has seen virtually no business diversification. None. Nada. Zilch. This isn't economic development, it's economic hospice care. Meanwhile, Lincoln County, home to North Platte, has become the poster child for decline. The mayor knows exactly what's at stake, warning that if we don't end it in another 50 years, we might not be here. 50 years might sound like a long time, but in demographic terms, that's a blink. That's your kids' generation watching their hometown become a ghost town in real time. But surely the state's booming economy is helping, right? Well, about that. The economy is great if you live in Omaha. Let me paint you a picture of Nebraska's supposedly thriving economy this year. The state crossed the 2 million population threshold for the first time in 2024, and business leaders are celebrating. Sounds fantastic. CEOs love to throw these numbers around at conferences. Except here's what they don't tell you, that growth came from international migration, more than 33,000 people between 2020 and 2024. Meanwhile, 46 counties saw a net loss in migration, meaning more people moved out than moved in. Hall County alone lost 1,306 people to outmigration, and Dakota County lost 976. Moreover, those jobs that do exist, they're increasingly concentrated in Omaha and Lincoln. The state's overall growth rate is around 1.2% annually, but urban areas show a rate of 1.8%, while rural areas struggle with stagnation, or worse. Omaha's population is around 480,194 as we speak, while hundreds of small towns continue their slow fade into irrelevance. The median home price in Nebraska sits around $294,600 as of August last year. Sounds affordable compared to coastal states, right? But here's the catch. Homes are staying on the market longer, 20 days, up 5 days from last year, and sales declined 3.8%. When people won't even buy affordable homes, you know something's deeply wrong. Simple, because wages in rural areas don't justify even these affordable prices, and because you can't eat affordably when the nearest grocery store closed down last year. The bigger question is, can Nebraska's rural communities recover? The answer is no, not without some serious changes. The housing paradox: can't build, can't stay. Here's a special kind of bureaucratic nightmare that deserves its own section: Nebraska's rural housing crisis. You'd think in a state with literally millions of acres of empty land, building houses would be easy. You'd be wrong. Hilariously, tragically wrong. The problem is multifaceted and maddening. High percentages of privately owned agricultural land make it difficult to develop new housing in rural counties. Farmers understandably don't want to sell prime agricultural land for housing developments, but that means there's nowhere to build. Add in floodplain restrictions, environmental regulations tied to grants, and local governments that are more focused on preserving character than attracting residents, and you've got a perfect storm of self-inflicted stagnation. Even when rural communities want to grow, they've effectively zoned growth out of existence. It's like being thirsty in the middle of the ocean, surrounded by what you need but unable to access it. The question becomes, are there any solutions, or should rural Nebraskans just accept their fate? The cultural factor nobody wants to talk about. Let's venture into uncomfortable territory for a moment. Population decline isn't just about economics, it's about culture too. Small town Nebraska life is lovely if you fit a very specific mold. You like hunting, football, and farming. You go to church on Sunday. You don't mind that the most exciting Friday night activity is watching the high school basketball team. You're okay with everyone knowing your business. But what if you don't fit that mold? What if you're gay in a town of 800 people? What if you're an atheist in a community where church attendance is the social currency? What if you're a young professional who wants access to art galleries, diverse restaurants, or a dating pool larger than your high school graduating class? The exodus isn't just economic, it's cultural. Young people increasingly want diversity, options, and anonymity that rural Nebraska simply cannot provide. And before anyone gets defensive, this isn't a moral judgment, it's a demographic reality. People vote with their feet, and they're voting for places that offer more than one Mexican restaurant and a Dairy Queen. This brings us to the uncomfortable truth about Nebraska's future. The demographic death spiral. Here's where it all comes together in a genuinely scary way. Nebraska's rural counties aren't just losing population, they're aging rapidly while simultaneously losing their youth. Between 2000 to 2010, net outmigration led to a decline of 20 to 24-year-old young adults in non-metropolitan counties by 28%. Think about what this means. Fewer young people means fewer births. Fewer births combined with an aging population means more deaths than births. More deaths than births means natural population decrease, which is exactly what many rural Nebraska counties are experiencing. Several rural counties in the state's western and north central regions have experienced significant population losses, with Grant County and Arthur County both declining more than 10% since 2020. Some Great Plains counties have lost more than 60% of their peak populations. This is what demographers call a death spiral, and it's nearly impossible to reverse once it starts. Even if you could magically create jobs tomorrow, you can't instantly create young families. And without young families, schools close. Without schools, young families won't move there, even if jobs exist. See the problem? Rural Nebraska is caught in a demographic trap that would require massive coordinated intervention to escape, and that intervention isn't coming. So what's the final verdict? Can anything save rural Nebraska? The brutal truth. Most rural Nebraska towns won't survive. Let me give it to you straight because somebody needs to. Most rural Nebraska towns are not going to make it. This isn't pessimism, it's math. When 54 of Nebraska's 93 counties have had cumulative population losses since 2020, and when the trend has been consistent for decades, you don't need a crystal ball to see where this is heading. Some towns will survive by reinventing themselves, maybe as retirement communities, maybe as tourist destinations, maybe as remote work havens for people who want cheap land and fiber internet. Parts of rural Nebraska and Kansas saw growth of about 2% from 2020 to 2022, showing that targeted strategies can work. But most won't adapt. They'll cling to nostalgia, resist change, and slowly fade away until the last resident turns off the lights and locks the door. The Buffalo Commons proposal, returning vast stretches of the Great Plains to natural prairie, isn't looking so crazy anymore. The state's overall population might keep growing thanks to Omaha and Lincoln, but that growth will increasingly come at the expense of everywhere else. Nebraska isn't dying. It's just concentrating all its life in a few urban centers while the rest of the body withers. Is this fate inevitable? Maybe. Is it tragic? Absolutely. Could it be prevented with aggressive policy changes, massive infrastructure investment, and a fundamental reimagining of rural economic development? Possibly. But will that happen? Don't hold your breath. So here's what I want to know from you. If you're from rural Nebraska, are you staying or leaving? If you left, what would it take to bring you back? If you're still there, how long do you think your town has? And for those of you watching this from Omaha or Lincoln, comfortable in your growing cities, remember that the good life Nebraska promises is increasingly only available to those who live within your city limits. Rural Nebraska built this state. What responsibility do urban Nebraskans have as that foundation crumbles? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments. Let's have the conversation nobody wants to have about Nebraska's future. Whether you're a fifth-generation farmer watching your town die, a young person planning your escape, or someone who got out and never looked back, I want to hear your story. Because if we don't talk about it, if we keep pretending everything is fine while the state hollows out, we're complicit in the slow-motion collapse of rural Nebraska. The clock is ticking. Your town is shrinking. What are you gonna do about it? Now hit that comment button and tell me I'm wrong, or tell me I'm right. Either way, tell me something.